Hello everyone, and yes, I promise this is the last video I'll be uploading today, but we have to check out the fourth game of the rapid section of the World Fischer Random Championship. This time Carlsen with the white pieces against Caruana with the black pieces. Fabiano got right back into the match with a very nice miniature in the previous round. Now let's see what happens here. So Carlsen with the white pieces opens with d4. In the previous game, if you remember, we saw e4 and e5. Now we have d4 and f5, sort of a Fischer random Dutch. We have b3, Magnus opens up the dark square bishop, and knight to g6. We have knight to d3, knight now nicely controls c5 and e5, and now b6. Fabi opens up his light square bishop. We have castles, queenside castles that is, by Magnus, and now knight to d6, freeing up the square for his king to be able to castle. We have f3, and now comes queenside castle by Fabi as well. Knight to g3, and here comes f4. It's a very interesting idea, and it's basically where our game begins. Here, Fabi really takes, the adventurous path into this game. He pushes f4, we have knight to h5, and now queen to d5. So he sacrifices the f4 pawn for some rapid development. So let's see what he had in mind. Knight captures on h4 by Magnus. We have knight captures on f4, and the other knight also captures on f4. The queen is under attack, so Magnus grabs the pawn. Queen to a5, now going after the a2 pawn, but here Carlsen replies with e4. So what's the idea? Can Caruana grab the a2 pawn? Well, yes and no, because if queen captures on a2, then Magnus had in mind bishop to c3. And now the idea is king d2 followed by rook to a1, trapping the queen, and the queen doesn't really have a good way out. So what you could play here is e5, and then after king to d2, threatening rook to a1. Now you go e captures on d4. Queen captures on d4, and now queen to a3. You escape this way, but it comes, with a price. Rook to a1. You have to go to c5. Now we have a trade here. Captures, and now you lose the a7 pawn. So you don't really grab a pawn by grabbing a pawn. So not queen a2, rather we have e5 by Fabi, and now d captures on e5. We have knight to f7, preparing to recapture with the knight on e5, and now king to b1. Magnus no longer allows queen captures on a2. And bishop to b4, first attacking the rook. We have rook to e2, putting both rooks on light squares. Knight captures on e5, and now queen to e3. Magnus finally brings the queen into the game. We have bishop to c5, pushing the queen back. Queen d2, offering a queen trade, and now bishop to b4, again attacking Carlsen's queen. Queen to c1, and now bishop to a3. And here Carlsen just blocks it. Bishop here, we have bishop captures, queen captures, and queen to c5. And now Magnus doubles up on the d file. So for the moment, Carlsen has excellent development, and Fabi's pawn sacrifice hasn't really paid off just yet. We have a5, Fabi starts the attack now, and we have knight to d5 by Magnus. An excellent outpost for the knight. If you want to get rid of it, you have to give up your light square bishop, which is something you don't want to do, as then Magnus gets all of the light squares for himself. So bishop to c6, preparing to bring the king into the game this way, and then bring the rook over to the a file, perhaps start pushing the a pawn. We have a3 by Magnus, preparing b4, king to b7, and now b4, not allowing Fabi to go along with his plan. A captures, and now queen all the way back to f8. Knight back to e3, opening up now the d file for Carlsen's rooks, and now d6. We have knight to c4, offering a trade here, and now rook to a8. Fabi now will attempt to double rooks on the a file, so he can activate both the rooks, but now b5. We have bishop to d7, and here Carlsen waits no longer. He plays knight captures on d5 with check. So you have to accept the knight sacrifice, otherwise you're just going to lose material. We have pawn captures, and the rook captures on d6. And here the situation on the clock is Carlsen is down on time. He's 3.5 minutes, Fabi is 6 minutes, but Carlsen is on the attack. And here you don't, well, it's not all that easy to defend. The threat is just rook captures here, so you'd win 2 pieces for the rook, even though, okay, you sacrifice the piece, so basically you would be down the exchange. But what you really want to prevent is queen d4. So what you maybe could play is rook to a4 to take away the d4 square from white's queen, but then you just allow this. So Fabi decided he doesn't like bishop to c8. Yes, you are saving the bishop, but then you get queen d4, and you don't have a way of defending against queen to b6. It would just be very ugly. You have to play rook a7, clear the a8 square for the king. So Fabi decided to do that right away. He played rook to a7. And now Magnus takes the two pieces. Rook captures with check, knight captures. We have captures with check, king to b8, and now captures on a7. We have king captures on a7, and now bishop to c4, preparing bishop to d5 to really try and finish off this attack. But Fabi is able to consolidate. He plays queen to c5, attacks the bishop here, and now Carlsen doesn't like queen captures on g7. Which is definitely a good move. For example, if queen captures on g7, you could block with rook to e7, but then you can go back queen to b2, and now it's a bit funny because if queen captures bishop, then you get queen a3 check and you pick up the rook. But with a little time on the clock, you don't always find such nifty resources. So bishop to d5 by Magnus first, and now rook to e7 by Fabi, guarding the pawn here. We have queen to a2 with check, king to b8, and now queen to a8 with check, king c7, and now queen to c6 with check. And this is just a great moment in the game. Carlsen sacrificed first the piece, then after he grabbed two pieces for the rook, he was basically down the exchange. And here he just decides that trading queens is good for him. So he plays queen to c6 with check. We have queen captures with, removing check. B captures on c6, and now rook to e5. So here Magnus has a beautiful pawn chain here, and he's definitely up material. He has 6 pawns. Fabi only has 3. White is better here, but okay, for the moment, this bishop is basically a pawn in the chain, so you have to start pushing those pawns. So f4 by Magnus. We have rook to h5 and now h3. Rook to h4, trying to somehow activate this rook. f5 now. We have rook to f4, and here Magnus is down to 1 minute. Fabi still has 2 minutes on the clock, and g4 by Magnus. So if you go after the h3 pawn, which is what Magnus wants you to do, then Magnus gets to push e5, f6, and so on if you go after the h3 pawn. But it's hard to find any other moves. Fabi plays h6, but now c4. Pushing even more pawns further, and now rook to f3, going after this pawn, as you don't really have any other ideas. With e5 now by Magnus, and now comes rook captures on h3. We have f6. Now just trying to create a pass pawn, either by capturing here, then it's just game over. You cannot allow this. So we have g captures, e captures, and now rook to e3. And here f7. So it's a protected pass pawn. There's if it's anyone who can win this game, it's white, but black still has a rook, so maybe he can hold on to this. We have rook to e1 with check, king to c2, and now rook to f1, not allowing f8 to just queen. But now what do you do? So Carlsen starts bringing the king into the game. King d3. We have king to d6, blocking, and now king to e4. Fabi goes rook to f6, and now you can feel free to pause the video and try to find a nice idea for Magnus in this position while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on being such an excellent endgame player. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, you could go king to e3 and wiggle around for a bit, but in the end it all comes down to this move, c7. So congratulations to everyone who found it. Now you are just threatening to either queen the pawn or win the e5 square for your king. Of course, Fabi had to capture it. Now comes king to e5. The rook is under attack. Rook has to go back. Rook to f1. And here, king to e6. So what do you play here? King to d8 by Fabi, but now bishop to e4. And it was after bishop to e4 that Fabi resigned the game. Fabiano Caruana resigned the game, and this means he's out of the World Fischer Random Championship because the result at the moment is 12.5 to 7.5, and out of the 24 possible points, Carlsen already has 12.5. That's over a half, so we will not be going into the Blitz section because you only get 1 point for a win in the Blitz section. So here he resigns because, well, if you don't do anything, then white will just go bishop to f5, block the rook, and the next move you're just going to queen the pawn. You cannot move the rook because just f8 queens the pawn with check. So here you could just waste the move, but like I said, bishop f5, and it's all over. Rook e2, king f6, and next move you just queen the pawn. There's nothing you can do here. You could try something like this to give up the rook and maybe try and do something about the bishop, but it's just pointless. It's completely winning for white. So Of course, Fabi knows this, and after bishop to e4, he resigned the game. So Carlsen versus Caruana ends in 12.5 to 7.5. Fabi got 2 very nice wins in, but in the end, Magnus was able to advance to the finals. I will not mention who he will be facing in the finals, as I'm planning to show some more games tomorrow from the Nepo versus Wesley So match. But if you're really interested, you can always check for it yourselves online. So yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Doug McNabb for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the World Fischer Random Championship, checking up on the 22nd European Team Championship, and of course on your wonderful suggestions. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.